here, but we're just giving an extra minute or two to let people sign in to the chat box and let us know that they're here. If you put your name and state, we would appreciate it. Also, just a few housekeeping items before we get started, and I turn the webinar over to today's moderator, Lisa Spear. We want to remind you that if you'd use the chat box for any questions or communications during the webinar today, that would be very helpful for us. There's also a Q&A box, so that's a little confusing, but if you would use the chat box, that way we know we can all see it. We have 3 CoSA staff members on here today, Executive Director Ann Ackerson, IT Coordinator Becky Jolson, and me, and we'll be monitoring the chat box during the webinar so that if you have any issues, we'll know about it. And then we'll also be making sure that we get all your questions to the speakers during the question and answer period. And without further ado, I will turn the microphone over to Lisa Spear from Arkansas, who's our moderator today. Many of you know Lisa. She is the Arkansas State Archivist and also the Arkansas State Historian. In addition to all the work that she does in Arkansas, she's also very involved with CoSA and is one of CoSA's board members. So, Lisa?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the second and final SHRAB Town Hall of the 2017 CoSA webinar series. And it's my pleasure to serve as moderator today. We have a good group of speakers lined up to talk about State Historical Records and Advisory Board activities and ongoing conversations between CoSA and the NHPRC. Joining us today is Dan Stokes, and we're always glad to have Dan join us for these webinars and at our CoSA meetings. Dan's the Director of State Programs at the National Historical Publications and Records Commission. And today he's going to be updating us on what's happening with the Executive Director position at the NHPRC now that Kathleen Williams has left for another opportunity, and also about 2018 grant funding for the agency. Then we'll hear from John Dugan, Missouri State Archivist, who's also chairing CoSA's NHPRC Task Force. Last, our third speaker is Daniel McCormick from the Massachusetts State Historical Records Advisory Board. Dan is the Archivist and Records Manager for the town of Burlington and a member of the state SHRAB. Also, I understand reformed journalist. The Massachusetts State SHRAB was the 2017 recipient of the CoSA-NHPRC SHRAB Award of Merit, and so Daniel is going to be telling us about the great work of the SHRAB in Massachusetts. So at this time, I will turn things over to Dan Stokes.
All right, hello everybody. Glad to be here with you. As Lisa said, I'll provide some information about our Executive Director position and funding for next year, or for what starts for us on Sunday, our fiscal year 18. So as many of you may know, Kathleen Williams took a job across the street at the National Gallery of Art to become their Chief Archivist. And so we now have an acting Executive Director who is the Chief of Staff for the Office of the Archivist of the United States. And she has been meeting with the staff of the NHPRC to kind of get up to speed on what we do and where we are and what each staff person does. So she will be acting for however long it takes to hire someone new. The search process has begun at the very first step, although NARA isn't currently under a hiring freeze. Every vacancy does have to go before a review board to determine whether or not that position can be filled. And so that's where the search process is right now, is actually getting the formal approval to actually start to prepare a job description for the position and to start posting that and taking applications. So we are expecting within the next day or two to actually get permission to start the formal hiring process. And then we'll go through the process of preparing the application for that. We're not quite sure how long that's going to take. The archivist may wait until the November 16th meeting of the commission to really get their input on what they're looking for in a new executive director. So it could be several months before a person is actually here. but we'll keep you up to date on how that whole process is going. For fiscal year 2018 grant funding, as usually happens, Congress was not able to put together the different funding bills for the different departments of the government to start work October 1st, which is our fiscal year start date. So they have passed a continuing resolution, and the President has signed the continuing resolution through December 8th. Basically, that means that we have funding for 18 equal to what we had in 17. However, you cannot just go out and spend all that money in the hopes that if you get a reduction that you will say, well, sorry, we've already spent it all. Basically, what this means is that since they funded us for only 2 months of the year, we only get the equivalent of that much money. So basically, we have only about $1 million that we can spend because of the limit on the amount of time we can only spend up through what we would have through the first 2 months of the year. So we will be a little bit at a disadvantage at our November meeting because we won't really know how much money we have. In the funding bills, the House put in for $4 million. Our congressional office has told us that they're expecting the Senate to put in for either $5 or $6 million, and then there will be some kind of a reconciliation. It's hard to tell now with all the hurricane activity if that's going to result in rather huge increases for the FEMA budget or in other emergency areas that might require that there are cuts to other programs. So we'll just have to wait and see over the next few months how that's going to work out, because we're kind of all in the same guessing game. I also wanted to update you on a little bit on board activities. At the State Board Symposium in July, we had talked about state boards as a group reviewing draft applications, and I did send out to several boards about 15 drafts that we did receive and gave them the option of submitting informal reviews and of working with the applicants to help them with their final application. And I'll be going back to all those states to find out what they actually decided to do, if they did do reviews, if they did contact the applicants to work with them, and how they did that and how we might look at that process and work on it to change it for next year if that's what we need to do. I also wanted to warn you all that to both coordinators and board members that we will be requesting individual board members to serve on panels for archival projects applications, which are due in a week on October 5th. So after those have been looked at and reviewed for eligibility, I'll be then contacting the state coordinator to say, here's the type of project that's come in and who on your board do you think is the best fit for this type of project. Normally what we look for, if we get a college and university application, we like to have a college and university archivist to review it. So we'd ask for someone who fits that description to review that and serve on a panel. Remember that if you are on a panel, you don't just review the application from your state, but from all the other applications that are on the panel. And I will be sending out an email to all the coordinators, deputy coordinators, to remind them of this process so that we're sure that they know how that's going to be handled. Also, this is different this year. The October 5th deadline is also for public engagement applications. And although boards and board members are not asked to review those, I'll be sending those out to you so that you will have an idea of what people in your state are doing in the public engagement area. These often are education type programs where people develop programs for people to use records or work with records. And so even though you don't review them, I think it's important that the state boards know what activities are going on at various repositories in their state. And then also from the symposium this summer, we thought about two other ideas that we could deal with fairly quickly. One of those is annual reporting, which is actually a requirement, but we haven't exactly followed that requirement. too stringently, and we're going to start putting that into effect now, where every board submits a brief annual report. I know many of you create these anyway, and send them to either a higher up in your agency, or you send it to state legislators or other groups. But these are reports that we're going to want, and it was requested that we do a specific format so that you all knew what information we wanted. So we'll be working to develop that format, and I'll be asking some state coordinators to review the annual reporting form and see if it's something that would work for them, not take too much time, but also provide the commission with the information they need to determine funding priorities for board funds. Also, the board member training and resources, doing the same type of thing with that, of checking with some boards to find out what board members would have appreciated when they first came on in the way of training for what they need to do, and resources that they can use throughout their period on the board, so that broader areas that deal with NHPRC are covered by the actual NHPRC staff, whereas the state coordinator or the deputy or the chair of the board or someone else can deal with activities that are specific to that board. We didn't want the board coordinators to have to provide information about the NHPRC more broadly, when we'd rather they focus their time on things that are specific to their board members. So we'll help out with that by providing different things, and some of it will be based actually on resources that you've already created for your board that we think will be useful to other boards and other board members, so that we don't start from scratch, but we use ideas that have already been created and that have been successful in the past, so we can continue to use those. And I think that's where I stopped.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dan. It's always good to hear from you and about what's going on at the NHPRC. So next we will hear from Missouri State Archivist and Chair of COSA's NHPRC Task Force, John Dugan. And John is going to tell us a bit about ongoing conversations between COSA and the NHPRC. John?
So I do serve as the chair of the COSA Task Force. What we are trying to work from is the great open discussion that we had at the SHRAB Symposium in Boise, and there were a lot of good ideas that came from that symposia. As a matter of fact, some of the items that Dan was just talking about are things that Dan is already implementing, or ideas that came from that symposia. There were some other things that maybe are going to take a little bit longer, a little broader vision kind of things that this task force is also looking at as well. And so hopefully we can do several things over time with discussing with the NHPRC. And we haven't really started that discussion with them. The task force first is trying to kind of establish a foundation that then we can reach out to the NHPRC staff with. But what we're trying to basically do is strengthen the SHRABs, make them more flexible is one of the key points I think we're focusing on. And we're looking at that because it seems that each state is unique. It's different. They have a different governance structure. They have a different operating structure. Sometimes they have different missions. Some of them are pretty narrow. Some of them are much broader than just what is required by the needs of the NHPRC. One of maybe the most challenging things is the appointment process for a lot of our boards. So we're looking at a variety of the things that differ across all the state historical records advisory boards. And then we're trying to create a draft document from that that shows maybe where some of the issues are and propose ideas for solutions maybe as well with that. And then we're hoping once that we have that draft document to be able to share those with the NHPRC staff, and I think they've expressed an interest in sharing those with the NHPRC itself and others. So right now we're still working on that draft document, but we hope in the near future to be able to share that with Dan and the other folks at the NHPRC. So, and that's the report I have.
Great. Well, thank you, John, to you and to the other members of the task force for investing your time and energy into these important discussions and considerations. Our third speaker today is Daniel McCormick, who I've already introduced. Daniel is from the Massachusetts State Historical Records Advisory Board. He's the Archivist and Records Manager for the town of Burlington and a member of the Massachusetts SHRAB. Not coincidentally, the Massachusetts SHRAB was the 2017 recipient of the CoSA-NHPRC SHRAB Award of Merit. That's an award that's presented annually to a SHRAB project or program that results in strengthening the condition or access of documents and records within its state. And I'll take just a second of Daniel's time to mention that SHRABs are encouraged to self-nominate for this award, and that the deadline for the next round of nominations will be May the 1st, 2018. So if your SHRAB has done something that you feel is noteworthy, please consider nominating. You can go to the programs link on the CoSA website to learn more about the award criteria. And the CoSA Awards Committee, which I'm chairing this year, will be sending out reminders in early 2018. So I'll turn things over to Daniel right now and ask him to tell us about all the great work of the Massachusetts SHRAB. Daniel?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And there is a lot of great work going on in Massachusetts with our SHRAB. By way of introduction, I've been a member of the Mass SHRAB for 15 years, and for 5 years. I have been Archivist Records Manager for the town of Burlington for 15 years, and as a native of the Bay State who's worked, lived, and I've done a lot of work in history in Eastern, Central, and Western Mass. It's a great honor to serve the citizens of the Commonwealth as a member of the SHRAB. Massachusetts, as you know, we're one of our first states. We have a very long history and tradition of localism from 1620 with the Pilgrims Landing up until today. The Mass SHRAB in its programs are, we believe, a great value proposition for historical records in the Bay State. We provide, we believe, a maximum return on investment for our NHPRC grants and for our other assistance by delivering programs and services directly to localities and by collaborating with local and regional groups. We have 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts, and there is a lot of history there. A lot of it is kept kind of under wraps, in town halls, in churches. We want to help bring that out to the rest of the world. So our programs fulfill a number of the goals of the NHPRC strategic plan. Specifically, Goal 2, expanding access to the nation's historical records. Goal 3, engaging the American people in preserving and discovering the American record. And Goal 4, enhancing the capacity of small and diverse organizations with historical collections. We have, worked with, a large number of, cities and towns in Massachusetts. I'd say we're probably over a third right now who have directly received our services. And, our goal in the end is to, if we can, reach every city and town in Massachusetts, and in the end, reach every individual in Massachusetts. And we have a very, very strong, very, very diverse SHRAB. Our members, we come from all over Massachusetts. We provide a very, very deep knowledge base of where historical records are, and we meet 6 times per year. We also meet with other historical organizations once per year at a conference, which I'm sure we'll be talking about a little bit more within this. I can tell you that, we have a very, very strong and very, very good communication structure. I noticed that Veronica Matzel's on there. Veronica is really the person who keeps us moving, keeps us going, very well. She keeps us organized, she keeps us moving, and she especially keeps us moving forward. Okay. If we can go to the mission and goals. We support communication and we facilitate collaboration among the state's historical records communities and the general public. We look to leverage our position as a state board, our funding from the federal government, and our expertise. That's our very strong knowledge base to better care for historical records in localities. We look at and we respect local history. A lot of us, we do work directly in our municipalities, in our localities, and we understand how important that is to cities and towns. We don't tell them strictly what to do, but what we want them to do is to handle their history and handle their records that much better. Our programs, they're aimed at helping groups and organizations at the community level. We try to, marry up, any number of groups, organizations within cities and towns to, work together to understand, to share their history, and to take care of it better. And we also pursue collaborations with other groups and organizations in order to coordinate records programs on a statewide scale. We can work within a city or town to bring together churches, to bring together municipalities, libraries, museums, but what we want to do is we want to create networks that are going to bring together, people from all over the state. Let's see, going forward, we would like to have really a unified structure, and later on when we take a look at the Commonwealth History Collaborative, which is a project that's going to be basically an electronic portal that will bring together a number of different groups, organizations to show where their collections are, what they have. I mean, that's going to be kind of like a virtual home for all of Massachusetts history. We're looking forward to that. We think it has some great possibilities, and we're just hoping that we can get a lot of participation from people in cities and towns. I use the word hoping a lot, and attempting to create collaboration. People aren't necessarily told that they have to participate, that they have to collaborate, but we're showing them how by taking care of the history better, by working, with other groups, organizations, they can, have a better sense of their own history, and they can work with other people to show how everyone's history is very, very important, whether it's Burlington's history to our neighbors, whether it's, out in Western Massachusetts to Eastern Massachusetts. We really want to break down a lot of barriers that we find when there is a tradition of localism. Okay. And our board, it reflects the roster of historical records holders in the Commonwealth. We're led by Dr. John Warner, who's the state archivist and the coordinator. I mentioned Veronica Matzel, our deputy coordinator. There's no way we could do any of the work that we do without Veronica. And we're supported by Rachel Onif, our roving archivist. I'll mention her a little bit later on. Our board, the actual board, has 9 members on it. We're municipal clerks, we're leaders of local historical societies from 2 very different communities. We have the head of a statewide history organization. We have librarians. Many of us actually are practicing librarians. We have a state library representative, that's Gregor Trinkus-Randall, and we have a college and university archivist from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. I want to point out the work that Rachel Onif, our roving archivist, does. Rachel's the person who, with funding from the SHRAB, will go out to different cities and towns all throughout Massachusetts. She'll go to the town halls, she'll go to the churches, and she will help them get a hold of what they have as far as their records. She'll help them to, conceptualize them. She'll help to take care of them. She'll show them, the right ways to undertake preservation. Rachel is really kind of our force projector. The work that we want to do that we can't all individually do, we send her out to do it. And, I believe that she's visited over 1/3 of the cities and towns in Massachusetts. And if she hasn't exactly visited them, her influence has been felt, through, meeting with them at conferences. Rachel is, really the type of person I wish that every state could have, because she goes out, her approach is, it's very, very non-pressure. It's a non-pressure filled approach. She's a very, very good teacher and an extremely good communicator. We have a great board. We've got a strong knowledge base. As I said, we represent all parts of Massachusetts, and it's really an honor to serve with members of the board. Okay. So, now, our approach has to respect our history of localism. By a history of localism, we have borders in all 351 of our cities and towns. While geographically we're not a very large state, we are very settled, and we identify very much with our communities. As a SHRAB, we use our position and we use our resources to execute programming that helps preserve history in our localities. At the same time, we collaborate wherever possible with groups and organizations to build community within the state's historical records landscape. We provide direct assistance at the community level to localities and organizations through our programs, and we seek to eliminate barriers to cooperation among the members of the historical records communities while helping maintain their own special places and roles within the community. Our programs bring a professional approach to local history. Okay. Now, as far as our major initiatives and goals, the SHRAB is responsible for reviewing NHPRC grants. Through the assistance of NHPRC funding, we offer 3 ongoing programs. There's the roving archivist. We're professional. That's Rachel, and that's her meeting with people from a community. She'll conduct on-site visits to local historical societies, municipal offices and libraries, and other institutions. She assesses programs, advises groups on taking care of their records, and she may also go back, makes other visits to see how they're doing, and may assist them with, some more enhanced services, such as assessing the structure of their organizations too. We also have a re-grant program where we provide funding for supplies for institutions where they may want to take care of their records. They don't have a line item in their budget, for supplies. Okay, we will provide, upon application, some of the funding for those supplies. In the town of Burlington, I can tell you that we have benefited from that. We also offer a series of grant writing workshops at different areas throughout the state. Going forward, we also want people to be taking care of their own electronic records that much better, and that's why we offer some personal digital workshops. The personal digital workshops, those will teach people how to take care best of their digital records. And during the past year, the SHRAB was also tasked with reviewing applications for grants under a statewide initiative providing funds for veterans-related historical projects. And as that initiative has been renewed, we're going to be planning to do that again this year. Go forward. Right here, this is just a shot of a town clerk who has benefited from the re-grant program. You can see that she's got some of her records that have been conserved, that are now housed properly, and that aren't all over the place. She's been able to apply, receive funding from us, and her records are now much better organized than they had been beforehand. Forward. And, when we're talking about the grant writing is something that a lot of cities and towns, they don't have a professional grants person to undertake. You can see up here, this is Gregor Trinkus-Randall, who's speaking to people from some cities and towns. And, from the work that he's done, from the work that we've had other instructors doing, people from cities and towns have been able to take and they've been able to apply successfully for grants, whether they're SHRAB grants or grants from other foundations. The personal digital archiving workshops, those that have started, and we've received a lot of very, very positive feedback on them from people who had no idea how they were going to take care of their records going forward. Can we move forward? And moving forward, beyond direct assistance to municipalities, we partner up with other groups for initiatives that benefit the entire Massachusetts history landscape. In June of each year, we help sponsor the Massachusetts History Conference, bringing forward representatives of historical organizations from throughout the state. This takes place in Worcester, Massachusetts, which is in the heart of Massachusetts, right in the middle of the state. And it's really gratifying to see people who have benefited from the roving archivist, from the re-grants, who are coming, and they're wanting to learn a lot more about how to take care of and collaborate with other organizations. And it's, for me, particularly gratifying to see people I've worked with who perhaps may have been with a college or university, maybe with a large private library, or maybe with a small historical society, sitting down at the same table and exchanging ideas. This is really a great thing, and we want to see that continue to move forward. Next. We're also working with the University of Massachusetts Amherst on the Commonwealth History Collaborative. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, and it's a web-based portal providing unified access to information about Massachusetts-based historical societies and libraries that care for materials of historical and cultural value. we want to see as many cities and towns participating with the Commonwealth Historical Collaborative as possible. Right now, there isn't one place where people can go find out about Massachusetts history or access collections, whether it's in municipalities or whether it's in different institutions. And we see a lot of positive momentum toward the Commonwealth Historical Collaborative, and we think that it's going to be a very, very useful tool for people from, the very, very seasoned users right down to people at the local level. This is going to be, I think, populated a lot better in the coming years. I'd say really watch for this, and I hope you'll be able to perhaps scale this to your own states. Can we move forward? And moving forward, we seek many more meaningful and tangible connections, both within our state and outside of Massachusetts. We realize that Massachusetts has a strong history of localism. I've beaten that to death. But it's a fact of life here, and there are opportunities for us to collaborate both inside and outside of our borders. Now, in March of this year, we invited representatives of the 5 other New England SHRABs to a summit meeting at New England Archivists. We called this the SHRAB Summit, and this session had people from 5 of the 6 Massachusetts SHRABs. It provided a lot of lively discussion and exchange of ideas among participants, and we want to see a lot more cooperation between ourselves and other SHRABs in the future. Personally, I would like to see this going on a scale perhaps across the country, where people from some of the western states, people from some of the southern states, you also collaborate. I think the challenge for us in New England right now is how do we turn this into a more permanent structure? That's something that we're still working on. That's something that I think about all the time, and I think we can do this. It's going to take a little bit of work, a lot of dialogue, but it's a case of collaborating, having that notion that we all need to collaborate and that we want to break down our borders. We do have borders between cities and towns. We have them between states, but to the greatest extent possible, we want to erase those. Can we go forward? And in conclusion, what the Mass SHRAB does is we have a very, very local focus, and we've got an eye toward collaboration. We have a professional approach. We want to bring a professional approach to local history. There's nothing that says in your locality, whether you're a little town of 150 out in the Berkshires or you're the city of Boston, that you can't have local history and that you can't also be very, very professional in doing so. From NHPRC and through the SHRAB, we see that direct support provides some very, very tangible benefits. Better stewardship of resources, and we think that it, in the end, begins to create a heightened historical consciousness among residents and among people within Massachusetts. The consciousness is going to be created, we think, much better through tools such as the Commonwealth Historical Collaborative, through conferences like the Mass History Conference, and also by, people collaborating, talking, and working with each other. And we think that this provides very much an exceptional return on investment, both for people in Massachusetts and for what we do on behalf of NHPRC and CoSA. Anybody have any questions?
Thanks, Daniel. This is Barbara Teague. Lisa Spears, our moderator, is going to take any questions that you have. I see a couple that we have in the chat box. Veronica had a question for Dan Stokes about the annual report that he mentioned. Will those be part of or in addition to reporting that we do for the board grants?
The annual report will be in addition to, although a lot of the information that will be included in it will come from your reports. Basically, my intention is to fill in as much of the information myself from what we already know, and then just get other things from you, such as, at the end of the year, how many vacancies did you have? Did you have new people come on, other people leave? And other more general information that we may not get in your program reports, such as activities you may have outside of your grant-funded activities. If you've done things that were just things like if you don't have minutes that you send to me, did you review legislation that was pending in your state? I know some state boards have done that, and they reported that in their grant reports, and others may be doing that same thing, but we don't hear about it. But the main thrust of making sure we do this is to ensure that folks who don't have grants have the opportunity to share with us the activities they're engaging in. But it will be a separate report, but it won't contain a lot of, you won't have to go out and find a whole lot of new information if you already have a board grant.
Thank you, Dan. This is Lisa Spear, who now has the mute button on her phone turned off. Okay. And Daniel, thank you for a very good presentation on what's going on in Massachusetts. And thanks for a reminder that breaking down borders serves all of our best interests. There's a finite pool of resources that we have to draw from, and collaboration benefits us all. While we're waiting for some additional questions to come in, I have a couple for our speakers. John Dugan, can you give us a little more information about the timeline of the work of the task force?
Hopefully my mute button is now off too. So actually, we are supposed to have a draft of the document to the full task force this week. And we're going to have another meeting next week to hopefully approve that to be sent to the NHPRC. So I guess the answer is soon, but there's not a specific time for that. And that's really just the beginning of a dialogue. That's not the end of the task force by any means. I think it's just a kind of a start or a building on what actually was started in Boise back in the summer.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, here's another question that's come in from Barbara. Is there an agenda for the New England SHRAB Summit, or how were the discussions arranged? Daniel?
Well, the SHRAB Summit, I think we began talking about it back in January of 2016, and Veronica, you can correct me on that if I'm not right on with the date. But, you know, we talked about how we hadn't pulled people together. As it came about, we wanted it to be a relatively free-flowing discussion. There was an agenda, and the agenda was essentially, you know, we'd introduce ourselves, we would tell about some of the programs going on in our states, and then we would just begin opening up the dialogue as open as possible. You know, we wanted to get people to be comfortable, you know, working with each other, talking with each other, and then feeding off of the comments that we would all make. And I think that very, very open format was extremely helpful for, you know, getting people, you know, warmed up and then getting going and talking about things. You know, I was learning, for example, things about how Vermont does business, you know, how they, you know, provide staffing. And I was thinking, you know, why can't we do that? How is it we can't? You know, I was hearing about Connecticut's programs and was thinking, you know, this is great. This is some of what we're doing, but we can also learn, you know, from there. When we talk about collaboration, I remember very, very distinctly, I believe it was Heather Moran from the Maine SHRAB brought up the fact that Maine is having its 200th anniversary in 2020. Okay, Maine was set off from Massachusetts. You know, this is a great place where, you know, we can be collaborating with another state, perhaps on some of its programs, anniversaries, you know, anything else like that. But there are any number of others. And I think getting people together, getting them, you know, loosened up, and having people face-to-face is really, really important to, you know, starting to facilitate some dialogue. So my suggestion, if anybody was going to do this, you know, have people introduce themselves, but then just let the conversation flow, and it is going to flow.
Great. It's always very enlightening for me to hear about the work of the SHRABs in other states. The Arkansas SHRAB has not been as active as I would like, so it's great to hear about all of these other projects, and it's good to know we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. So when it's our turn to apply and hopefully receive some of this funding. There's so many good ideas that we can draw from. I have a question, Daniel, about your roving archivist work. Does Rachel assist in a kind of a hands-on fashion with collections care, or is her role largely educational?
She does do some work just once she's there on her visits, showing people how to do things right. You know, to be very, very honest with you, she is such a good instructor that you know, when she is showing people something, she's actually instructing, and when she's handling documents, when she's looking to, you know, find the locations of things, showing people how they can be doing things better. She may be actually, you know, hands-on assisting in a way, but she's also instructing, and vice versa. I mean, you know, that's one of the, you know, just incredible things about her, that, you know, she can, you know, handle both roles very, very seamlessly.
Great, thank you. Other questions for our presenters? Dan Stokes, unless I misunderstood you, it sounds like there might be potentially constrained or limited funding, maybe initially for the NHPRC. If that's the case, what do you think the priorities for the agency might be?
I think because of the continuing resolution kind of keeping us from spending as much as we might approve at the November meeting, what it's likely to do is not really cut back on our spending, but more likely to delay when grant letters go out. So in the case of the boards, we have 22 board applications that we'll discuss on November 16th. And so those that don't start until the next July, we'll just have to hold off on doing grant letters, which usually works out fine anyway because they are frantically trying to finish up their previous grants anyway. So it may just mean that you won't get a grant letter as soon, but those who have January 1st start dates for their grants are likely to be fine.
Okay. Thank you, Veronica, for the information you've been sharing about the Massachusetts SHRAB and the work they're doing. Does anybody have any questions? We have a few more minutes left for our webinar.
Lisa?
Yes.
Jody had a question in the Q&A asking if Daniel, if you would be willing to share training materials for the personal digital workshops.
Sorry, I missed that.
It's okay.
Okay. Let's see. I think I could probably get a hold of them, but the person who would be, I think, the best at getting a hold of or getting that to you might be Veronica. We'll talk to her about that.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Well, if we don't have other questions, then I'll turn things over to Barbara Teague, who will wrap things up for us. But before I do that, I'd like to thank our three presenters, Dan, Daniel, and John, today for taking time to share these updates and this information with us. Barbara?
Thank you, Lisa, and I'd like to second your thanks to our presenters. That was very informative. And be sure, everyone, to look at the chat box. Veronica has added a map for the roving archivist and regrant sites, and also a blog about the work of the roving archivist in Massachusetts, if you're interested in those. Just a few announcements for you at the end of the webinar, as we always do. We're going to return to our grants management theme for next month's webinar, which will be the final member webinar this year. We're going to do managing the unexpected. That's not unexpected in everything, it's just the unexpected in grant programs and grant projects. And our speakers are going to be Shelley Thompson from South Dakota and Lizette Pelletier from Connecticut. So please be sure to mark your calendars. Also, the following week after the webinar, Lizette and Shelley will be available for a conference call to discuss questions that may have come up when you're managing grants and what you do when things don't happen that you hadn't really planned. So be sure and mark your calendars for both of those. We also have a new webinar series. We'll be sending you further information and registration information about that. It's called Shop Talk, and it features our corporate sponsors. The first one we're going to do is in November 14th, and it's going to feature Family Search and some of their crowdsourcing projects and some of their other interesting information technology projects that they're working on. So please be looking for registration information for that coming to you pretty soon. Our upcoming events, of course, the highlight of the archival year is October because it's Archives Month. So every day is Archives Month during October, the 1st through the 31st. So I hope you're planning something. We also, Ann had asked our members yesterday to send any posters to Becky and any press releases or other information to me. So if you please get us your Archives Month information, we can also use that ourselves during the month of October to share that information out to our followers on Facebook and Twitter and on our website. CoSA is going to participate in Ask an Archivist Day on October 4th, and I hope many of you are going to do that as well. Ask an Archivist is a project of the Committee on Public Awareness within the Society of American Archivists, but many institutions and repositories are joining in, so please be sure and try to take a look at that for your institution. And CoSA's Electronic Records Day is on October 10th this year. That's finally not on a weekend and not on a holiday, so we're going to be on Tuesday, October 10th. It's going to be a busy day. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later in the webinar. And we have 2 upcoming meetings that many of our members will be attending: the National Digital Stewardship Alliance in Pittsburgh and Best Practices Exchange in Boston, so hope to see many of you there. And Electronic Records Day. Don't forget, it's very important for us to try to keep growing this event every year. It started, I think we figured out maybe 5 years ago, and we sent out a couple of press releases. Last year we had tweet after tweet, and we even had international people participating, so it was really an exciting day last year. We hope next year's this year will be even bigger. We're also offering a webinar, so please be sure to look at that and sign up for that. We sent out information about it, and it's also on our website, but if you have any questions about it, please let me know. And we have many resources on the website. We've updated all of the Electronic Records Day webinar or Electronic Records Day handouts that we've been using for the past several years. There's a lot of information there, a lot of things that you can use in your repository and in your community to draw attention to the importance of caring for state government electronic records. And we have an exciting announcement that I think many of you have heard of. We, CoSA, received an Institute of Museum and Library Services National Leadership Grant. We were just notified several weeks ago, and it starts October 1st. This is going to be implementing our Access Planning Grant, which took place several years ago. We're going to be working with the National Governors Association, the National Association of State Chief Information Officers, the National Association of Secretaries of State, and COSLA, our compatriots in the library, to help draw attention to creating public records the way they should be created within agencies, and then making sure that these associations are able to share information out to their members. We're going to be creating best practices guidance and case studies and other things that will help the members of these associations be more aware of the work that we're doing. We're hiring 2 contractors for this. One is Michelle Gallinger, who actually worked on the Access Planning Grant, and the other one is me. So we'll be starting work on this next week, and you'll be hearing a lot more about this through the next 2 years. Also, another announcement that we don't really have on a slide, but I know many of you have been concerned about what's happening with the archive, the territorial archives in the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. And we have CoSA's, participating in sort of a loose group that's trying to find out what's going on. It's SAA and the National Heritage Responders, and we're getting a lot of information from our retired territorial archivist Susan Lugo in the Virgin Islands, and she's been trying to contact someone in Puerto Rico. We hadn't really contacted anyone there until today. We saw some pictures about at the Archivo General. The windows are blown out and there's water within the building in San Juan. So we're trying to follow up and get as much information on that as possible. And we'll be sharing that with you. CoSA also has some very exciting news. We have a new corporate sponsor, LibNova, who is new to the United States just in the past couple of years, is going to sponsor CoSA's forthcoming publication, National Risk, which assesses our state electronic records initiative over the past several years. It was also produced with funds from the Institute of Museum and Library Services, but LibNova is going to help sponsor the publication of that. Be looking for that soon. We also want to thank all of CoSA's corporate sponsors. We're getting a very crowded slide here. We have so many nice corporate sponsors who help work with us on our many programs and projects. Ancestry, a long-term sponsor, as is Preservica and Family Search. Some of our newer sponsors, Gaylord Archival, APPX Software, Space Saver, and now LibNova. And of course, our federal funders, NHPRC, as Dan was representing NHPRC today, and INLS, which is sponsoring the grant that will start next week. There are many ways to stay connected with us. Don't forget, especially during Archives Month, and there's so much activity within the archival profession and within state archives. We'll have new information on our website. We're updating our PERTS portal, and we're also getting ready to have some training to show members or to refresh members' memories on how to update information to the portal. We'll be having a lot of Twitter and Facebook activity over the next month with Archives Month, Ask an Archivist Day, and Electronic Records Day, so please be sure and join in with us. And this is very important. We really would appreciate your feedback on our webinar today, and also because this will give you a chance to give us some ideas about what kinds of training you would like in the future. As I mentioned earlier, this next month will be our last member webinar for the year. We will have 2 other webinars with the Shop Talk webinar and the Electronic Records Day webinar, but we're planning the webinar series for next year, so we'd like to know a little bit more about what you're interested in. So in addition to taking the time to let us know what you thought about today, we also asked a few questions about what you're interested in for the future. So that would be really helpful if you would take a few minutes just to complete this. I know you've probably completed it before, but if you would do it this time as well, that would be very helpful to us. And if there are any, did anybody have any questions about anything or concerns? If not, it looks as if we will be giving you maybe 7 minutes of your time back. So take that time to write your Electronic Records Day press release, or to get some of your tweets ready, or to go to the CoSA website to look at the Archives Month posters that Becky is going to be uploading, or to look at the Electronic Records Day information that we have available that you can repurpose and use in your own repository. Thanks again for joining us today. Particularly thanks to all of our speakers and to all of our members who are here. Thank you so much, and we will see you at some of the upcoming webinars.